So in Islam, I think it's a very controversial topic. And I think that the general understanding that most Muslims have is that it is impossible that God had a messenger or a prophet that's a female. No, this is unheard of. It's blasphemy. It's heretical. It's crazy. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الإمام والمهديين وسلم تسليما السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
It's good to have you back, Tiffany.
Thank you so much for having me here.
So today, what are we talking about?
Today we have a question to answer, actually. On a previous episode that we recorded, this commenter left a question. Can these messengers ever appear as women too?
Okay, so that's a really good question. And in order to answer that question, I think first we have to examine in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, what are the different titles that are given to people that have communications with or are representatives of God. Okay, so if we go to the Old Testament in Judaism, we'll find that there's something called a prophet.
Yes.
And an example of a prophet would be somebody like Moses. So it's somebody who's receiving communications from God, revelations, hearing the voice of God, or speaking to angels.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
Then we have something called a priest. And a priest is also a messenger from God. It's somebody who's a representative of God. And he performs particular functions that have to do with purification or certain functions that have to do with the temple.
Yes.
And an example of a priest in the Old Testament would be somebody like Aaron, who is the vicegerent of Moses and his brother.
Yes.
Okay. We have also the title of a judge. And a judge in the Old Testament would be somebody who would lead the Israelites and judge them in all of their affairs. So they'd lead them into battles, into openings. And an example of that in the Old Testament is somebody like Joshua.
Yeah.
And what is the final example?
A king.
A king.
Yeah, like David, Solomon. Yeah.
Exactly. So that is the final example of a representative of God. They have the title of a king. But we find that the title messenger itself, or Rasul, is missing. It's absent from Judaism because they're all kind of seen as messengers of God.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. And in Christianity, the New Testament, basically it's the same as Judaism in terms of the titles, except we add on there, the title of apostle. Okay, and an apostle is somebody who is a messenger, but not a messenger directly from God, but a messenger from Jesus.
Yes, okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
and it's used to describe the 12 disciples.
Yes, the people who Jesus sent forth.
Exactly. And you have Messiah. And the Messiah, he's a king, but he's a special king.
Yeah.
He's the promised one. He's the savior.
Yes.
Okay. And then we have in Islam, we have a Rasul, and a Rasul is a messenger, and we have a prophet, a Nabi, and we have an Imam. These are the three titles that are given to people who are appointed by or representatives of God. And in Islam, there are 124,000 prophets that were sent to mankind, and there's 313 messengers. And every messenger is a prophet, but not every prophet is a messenger.
Okay.
And so the way that it's divided over there is not really so much about their function, because in Islam, for example, you have David and Solomon, and David and Solomon, although in Judaism they fall within the category of kings, but they're still representatives of God.
Yes.
In Islam, they are kings. But they are prophets, but they are messengers.
Okay.
And so, like I said, there's 124,000 prophets, but these prophets in Islam, they were people who reached a particular rank, and they managed to communicate or receive communications from God.
Okay.
But they were not given the task to go forward to the people of the earth with any particular message.
Okay.
So it wasn't their job, for example, to warn mankind that anything's going to happen, or to demand reformations in society, or anything of the sort, unless they were a messenger. Okay. And there's only 313 of them.
Okay.
So 124,000, they received messages, and at times they would speak about the messages or speak about the dreams which they had, or the communications with God, but they weren't given the task to do so.
Okay. That makes sense. There are certain people who had communication with God who had a more specific role, like they had to do something, they had to do a mission that God gave them. Yeah. But other people, it doesn't mean that they were the only people that God communicated with. There were other people who had prophecy. That makes sense.
Yeah, so it's like this ladder that human beings can climb up. Yeah. You have the general public. And then, you know, you have a layer above that are believers out of that general public. So the people from the general public, or the general human beings on the planet that chose to believe in the words of the prophet and the messenger. So that's a degree above the non-believers. Yeah. The believers, they hear God's words and they accept it, even though they're not hearing it directly to them. So it's through somebody else, but they accept it. So that's a rank higher. And then out of this group of believers, okay, all those who believe really firmly and with a lot of certitude in the words of the prophets or the messengers, it's a very real reality for them. And they don't doubt in it at all. From those believers, 124,000 were chosen and were good enough to pass on to the next level of faith, whereby God would give them themselves direct messages and signs and communications from him.
Okay. Yeah.
And then out of those 124,000 prophets, it's one thing to receive a message and to believe in it in the comfort of your own home, but it's a whole nother story to have to declare it publicly in front of the people, or to go forward and have that much faith in your dream that you demand on its basis, or you condemn a king or a tyrant on its basis. Yeah. And so there were only 313 of those prophets that had enough certitude and enough courage and enough determination to take their faith to the next level. And for that reason, God chose them and gave them the task to go forward and, rule over mankind or deliver particular messages.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, 313 is a really tiny number compared to how many human beings have lived throughout history. So yeah, it requires a huge amount of faith. And we even have, in the stories of the prophets and the messengers, how it was difficult for them to undertake this huge task in the beginning. They had to have a lot of faith to do it. So, yeah.
And then those 313 messengers that were sent to humanity, only to reach the next level, you have to have enough faith in your message that even if God had given you a message which was contradictory to the messages that you had heard about from previous prophets and messengers, that you would still be able to abandon what the previous prophets and messengers said and what the people were used to, and go forward to them with a brand new message and a brand new jurisprudence or law. And we find that although there was 313 that were determined enough to go face the people with their messages, only about 5 of them had the courage and the ability to go forward to their people with a new message which contradicted or was different than the messages that the people were used to. Because a prophet, it's hard enough to go to the people and tell them that you're a prophet, or to give them prophecies. But to give them now a new law that's different than what they're used to, that's going to cause a backlash and a lot of people to perhaps fight against you.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. And the number of those who were given that task and trusted with that task by God was very few throughout time.
And so we find that in Islam, if you reach that level and you become a prophet, messenger, who has that is of those of the Ulil Azm, or has the utmost determination, right, to be a messenger and to fulfill your duty as a messenger, that would be the rank of becoming an Imam. And that's why Abraham in the Quran, first he was a prophet, messenger, and then he was chosen to be an Imam.
Okay, yes.
Okay?
Yes.
So Imam means that you are above, you're one rank above being a normal messenger. And we find that those who reached that rank were Noah and Abraham and Moses and Jesus and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yes.
Those are the only ones.
Wow, it's so few. It's 6 people, or 5 people, sorry, that you've mentioned in all of history. Like, imagine the level of faith that you would have to be one of those very few people.
And then there's one level that's above that, but that's a complex topic that I think we need an entire episode to talk about. And that is the level of being 2 bows or less, and the level of being the number 1 winner in the race. And that's the level that the Quran describes Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as having reached after the night journey. And that's why he's the master of all creation and the best of mankind and the best of the messengers in Islam. Okay, so now that I've described the different titles and how Judaism breaks up the representatives based on the role that they perform or the function that they perform, and we mentioned over here also in Islam how Islam views it, we find that they're really titles. They signify things, but they're kind of they overlap one another. And so over here you have a prophet like Moses, and a priest like Aaron, and a judge like Joshua, and a king like David. In Islam, those 4 characters are 4 characters that received prophecies from God, and therefore they were prophets, and they were sent to nations, and therefore they were from the 313 messengers. And so all of them would be given that title of messenger.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, good. And it's important to say everything that we've said, because now we're going to be looking at whether or not females, women in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam could be classified as fulfilling those roles, or can we apply the title of messenger to them?
Okay.
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 In the Old Testament, in Judaism, it's kind of straightforward a little bit, in the sense that automatically and right off the bat, we have examples of women that were actually given the title of being a prophetess.
Yeah.
And a prophetess is somebody, it's the female version of prophet.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Somebody who's giving that communication from God. And yeah, you're right. The term is used in the Old Testament several times.
And it's known that in the Talmud they also have named 7 particular females as being the prophetesses of the Israelites. Mm-hmm. And you also have an example in Judaism. And so an example of a prophetess in Judaism would be somebody like, for example, Miriam.
Yes, yeah.
Or somebody like Sarah. These are women that received communications from God in the same way that the male prophets did.
Yes, yeah.
Whether it was a true dream or if it was an inspiration, these women, there was no difference between them and the men.
Yeah.
Then we have the role of a judge, and we do have an example of a woman who was a judge, yes. Actually. Yeah. Just like Joshua, she was leading armies and giving commands, military commands to the Israelites. Yeah. And that is who?
That's Deborah. Yeah.
Deborah. And the story of Deborah is fascinating in Judaism. She's the one who gets communications from God and is told that she has to send one of the military commanders, Barak, in order to destroy the enemy. Yeah. And he listens to her in full faith.
Yeah, he does. She's got quite a story. I would say she's got quite a unique role because she's actually playing this role of somebody who gives commands. And she gave a command to a man, and he actually did what she said, and they were victorious. Her role as a prophetess actually led to a great victory over the Canaanites, and that's quite a cool story. I mean, she's actually kind of unique in the sense that, not unique, but she's one of the only judges who's specifically called a prophetess and a judge. So that's pretty cool.
It is cool. Yeah. And so here we have a woman in the Old Testament that is called both a prophetess and a judge.
Yep.
But she's not a king.
She's not a king, no.
But she does kind of rule over them during that period in the same fashion that a king would, because she's
a leader.
She's a leader. But she's also existing in that time period before there was the appointment of kings.
Yeah, she was in the time of the judges, so I guess that was the highest rank of leadership you could achieve at that time. But yeah.
Okay. Do we have any examples in Judaism of a woman fulfilling the role of a priest or a king?
A king? No. There was no female king. No. A priest, I mean, you could argue that Miriam was kind of in the role of a priest.
For the women.
For the women, yeah. She was playing that leadership role. She's specifically called a prophetess, but she was kind of like a shepherdess of the women in that time of Moses. And for the women, she could have fallen into that category.
Okay, so pretty much for the most part, now we've answered the question in regards to Judaism. A woman can be and was, given the title of being a prophet, and she also reached the highest degrees of ruling over or commanding the Israelites in the name of God, and that was the role of a judge. Mm-hmm. So, in short, were there female messengers in Judaism? There absolutely was. Yeah. And there's no doubt about that with the Jewish people.
No, it seems quite normal, actually. It's sort of mentioned in passing, yes, that this woman was a prophetess, it wasn't emphasized. So it seems quite normal that in that faith and that belief that women could have this direct communication with God, yeah.
And we also have the example of which I think it's important probably to mention, of Huldah. Mm. And the Huldah story is unique, yeah. Because She's described as a prophetess, and there's a king at the time. His name is Josiah, and Josiah basically his helpers bring to him a scroll that had been lost, that people had abandoned, and they didn't have access to it anymore. And then he opens it up. They read it to him to see what this ancient scroll says, and they find that it was it was part of the Bible that they had lost, that contained in it, the stories. It was one of the books from Moses. And he realized that his people were doing a lot of idol worshiping that would bring forward the wrath of God upon them, in the same way that God's wrath had came down upon the Israelites previously. And the interesting part about it is that he sends forward somebody with this scroll to this prophetess at the time in order that she may, give news and interpret for the king, how God is feeling about Josiah and the Israelites right now. And God talks to Huldah, and Huldah sends the message forth that God's wrath is burning against the Israelites. And so the king of Israel at the time, he has a proof over him. He has a hujjah over him that he must obey, and that he seeks her guidance. And she's the veil between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and between him and between the Israelites. And she's a female.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big deal. You've got a male king going to a female prophetess, asking for her guidance. I mean,
and interpretation of scripture.
Exactly. I mean, that's a big deal. Yeah.
It is a big deal.
Yeah.
Okay, so in Judaism, there's no doubt. No doubt about it. A woman can serve as a messenger, as a spokesperson, as the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in creation. Yeah. Isn't that incredible?
Yeah. I mean,
okay, so in Christianity now, obviously the New Testament, it validates the Old Testament,
yes.
And says that everything in there is correct. And for that reason, and Jesus was a Jew, and for that reason, obviously Christians believe in the fact that there are these, messengers from God that are female.
They do, yeah, of course. I mean,
okay. What about in Jesus' time, Tiffany? Why don't you talk to me a little bit about, and talk to our viewers a little bit about the role of a woman in the ministry of Jesus Christ?
In the ministry of Jesus Christ, or in the time in general? Because when you're bringing up women and their communication with God,
you can mention both.
I'm immediately thinking, I guess because of my Catholic background, I'm immediately thinking of Mary, because Mary is seen as such a great intercessor between mankind and God. Actually, we as Catholics, you even pray for Mary to intercede on your behalf. Mary, she was absolutely, undoubtedly communicating with God. The angel appeared to her, gave her messages from God. Her relationship with God is documented in the Gospels, and I think she would absolutely qualify as a prophetess, somebody at that rank who was communicating directly with God. And otherwise, in the ministry of Jesus, we have another Mary. We have Mary Magdalene. She was given the message that Jesus had returned, right? After the events of the crucifixion, he appears first to Mary Magdalene, and he tells her to go and deliver the message to the men. So she's actually sometimes called the apostle to the apostles because of that great role that she played. And for the Christians, believing that Jesus is God incarnate, that would make her a prophetess, yes. Yeah.
That's incredible. So now we have also in Christianity, not just a validation of the Old Testament, but we have Jesus, whom they consider to be God, sending forward Mary Magdalene as his first and best messenger.
It's huge.
That is huge.
It's huge. And her role was so downplayed in history, but it is recorded in the Gospels that he gave her that honor and that she is the messenger to the messengers. So, yeah.
And the first witness of the resurrection.
Witness, yeah, the first one that he came to, and the one who recognized him. Yeah.
Okay. So then what about Islam? So in Islam, I think it's a very controversial topic. And I think that the general understanding that most Muslims have is that it is impossible that God have a messenger or a prophet that's a female. No, this is unheard of. It's blasphemy. It's heretical. It's crazy. Yeah. And they say that the word doesn't even exist, that the female word of a prophet or a messenger. There's no such thing as a nabiyya or a rasula or something of the sort.
Yeah.
It's not there.
Yeah.
So how can that be the case? But I think that's how the general population, the ignorant ones, would react to that. But in actuality, factually speaking, and there's a lot of people who do know the Quran and do know the reality of the beliefs and the narrations of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, and they would argue against that. And the truth of the matter is that we have examples of the importance of women in Islam that is striking right off the bat. For example, we have an entire chapter. The Quran has 114 chapters. One entire chapter is named after Mary, the mother of Jesus. And that's something that you don't even have in Christianity in the New Testament. Yeah. We don't have a gospel of Mary, mother of Christ, in there, but we do have a chapter about specifically that has the story of Mary in there and named after the mother of Jesus. And you don't even have a chapter that's named after the mother of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So she's immediately pointed out and distinguished from the rest. And in the story of Mary in the Quran, you have her being inspired by God when she's in a state of labor to shake the palm tree. So God is communicating now directly, inspiring her, just like he communicates with and inspires any other of his prophets. He does so with Mary. And not just that, but there's also, a verse where God sends a messenger to Mary before she becomes pregnant to give her glad tidings of the child that she is to bear. Yeah. And the understanding that Muslims have is that the angel that goes to her to bear these glad tidings is the angel Gabriel. Yes. And Gabriel is the angel of revelation, the one who carries the communications from God to all of the messengers. So in that sense, if being a prophet or being a messenger in Islam means that you are receiving divine inspirations from God and you're communicating with the angels, then Mary, mother of Jesus, ticks the boxes in regards to that and qualifies to be called a prophet. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What else is a prophet if not somebody who's receiving instruction, revelation from God directly? And she clearly was. But then they would argue, okay. Maybe she is a prophet, and maybe there are women that could reach the rank of prophet, but Mary wasn't necessarily sent like to carry a message to the people. So we can't say that she achieved the rank as being one of those 313 messengers. She's not a messenger, but she's a prophet. Mm-hmm. Well, do we have any other examples? We have the example also of the mother of Moses. Yes, Lucha. She did what God instructed her to through revelation, placing her child in the basket to save his life in order to try and save his life. God inspires Lucha. And in some narrations, he gives her a dream. In other narrations, he just puts it in her heart, like he does with David. But he just inspires her that in order to save Moses, she must place him in a basket and put him in the Nile River. And she accepts and does that commandment which God gave her.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a huge deal. That's almost like, how God inspired Abraham to take his child and to do something with his child. She was risking her child's life in doing so, and it was because of her faith in God and this message that she received from God that she did it. And look, it led to Moses and the whole ministry of Moses and the whole course of the Abrahamic faiths changing. Yeah.
Then we have Nargis in Islam. Particularly Shia Islam. Nargis is who? She's the mother of Imam al-Mahdi.
Yes, I love this story. It's really cool.
And she's the daughter of a Roman king, and they're at war with the Muslims, right? Mm-hmm. And she's a descendant of Simon Peter. And one night she's asleep, and God gives her a dream. And in that dream, she's told basically that she has to escape. Yeah. She has to go away, run away from her father's house, and she's going to be taken as a slave. Yeah. And after she's taken as a slave, the person who buys her is going to be the father of the person whom she's supposed to marry. Yeah. And that's exactly what takes place. She wakes up from the dream that she got from God. She believes in the dream, just like Jacob and Joseph and Abraham. She verifies it and she acts upon it. And it happens exactly as she saw it. Yeah. And she ends up being rewarded for that by being the wife of Imam al-Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam, after being bought and freed by the father of Imam al-Hassan, Ali al-Hadi, and she ends up being the mother of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam.
That story is so beautiful. That story always gives me some goosebumps. The level of faith that she had, and just the fact that God inspired her in that way, and there was no hesitation in her heart. She just did it. What God told her to do, and she ended up in the household of the Prophet Muhammad, like the household of the Ahlul Bayt. So that's such a cool story.
And then we have the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's narrated that whenever he would walk in on Fatima, that he would bow down. Out of, not out of worship and not out of, obedience to Fatima, but out of love, respect, glorification for the incredible rank that Fatima alayhi salam has been given by God. And the narrations from the Ahlul Bayt are very clear about the fact that Fatima was this light that existed before the creation of the entire world. And the implications in the narrations is that even Fatima alayhi salam had a special place with God, or that her existence even predated some of the more important figures in Islam. For example, one narration states that the Imams have stated that we are God's proof upon creation, and Fatima is a proof upon us.
Wow. That's a huge thing when you think about it.
There's another narration where it's kind of a Gnostic narration where God, tells the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that if it wasn't for Ali, I would have never created you. And then he says, and if it wasn't for Fatima, I would have never created Ali. And so this also is another secret narration that gives an insight into how some Muslims view the importance of the rank of Fatima. And there's other narrations which explain that the name of Fatima has to do with the very substance and light that was used to form the entire creation, and that she is basically a manifestation of the extreme mercy of God in creation. That while Imam Ali would be a reflection of God's mercy, Fatima would be a reflection of God's extreme mercy, Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim. And so she belongs in Islam to a group of women that are known as the mistresses of all of the women of paradise. And that is Fatima and Mary and Asya, the wife of Pharaoh, and Khadija, the wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These women are considered to be the best, and their rank actually is higher than all of the rest of the prophets and the messengers, and with the exception of a few. So, for example, Mary is not better than Jesus. Fatima is not better than Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But for the majority of the prophets and the messengers, whether it's Asya, whether it's Narjis, whether it's Zainab even alayhi salam, whether it's Fatima and Mary, mother of Christ, they have reached ranks that are higher than all of the rest, and they did receive revelations from God, and they did have communications with angels, and they performed particular functions. But these women that are mentioned were not necessarily sent to carry a message to a particular nation.
Yeah.
And the reason that's kind of implied in Islam is that if God had sent any of those women, for example, to the Arab nations or to some of the other peoples at that time, they wouldn't have been accepted. They would have been rejected. But having said that, the Quran does validate the Torah, and it is the Quran and the narrations of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and of the Prophet Muhammad have corrected things that they have seen wrong about the Old Testament. For example, the Prophet clarifies that it wasn't Isaac, but it was Ismail that Abraham was going to offer. It corrects that Jesus was not crucified, but when he prayed to God, it was made to look so, and that his prayer was accepted, and he wasn't actually crucified. He was saved from that. But there are no corrections that are made in Islam in the narrations of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, and there's no corrections in the Quran that negate the prophethood or say that this is not true, that there was Deborah as a prophet or Judge or Huldah or any of these characters.
Yeah, their stories stand. Yeah.
So their stories stand. So we would have to say that, in short, the answer is yes. A woman can reach the rank of prophethood, and that God Almighty, He doesn't look at the bodies, but He looks on at the souls, and that the potential are open for all of mankind, based on their sincerity, to reach through and go to the highest ranks that they can achieve.
That's so beautiful. And as a woman, I really appreciate to hear this answer because as you said, some people who have sort of hijacked religion, they say that it's impossible for a woman to be considered a prophetess, for a woman to have that level of faith that men reached, that they could have this direct communication with God. And clearly, that's not the case. When you go back and you look at the scriptures and point out these stories as you have today, it's clear that God looks at the hearts and doesn't differentiate based on gender. And
I want to say one thing, Tiffany, before we go, and I think it's really important. Yeah. I think it's this is an example of here God didn't say that it's not possible.
No.
He didn't say that. And he didn't say that the Torah or the Hebrew Bible or the New Testament is wrong in regards to that.
Yeah.
God in the Quran and his prophet, they didn't say disbelieve in this idea. It just didn't mention these particular women with that title, prophetess. But everything that it mentions about women over here kind of validates that.
Yeah.
And it also says to believe in that. And it said that the Torah was a revelation from God.
Yeah.
And then here we have non-working scholars deciding from their own selves to come to the conclusion that it's not possible. And we find the Muslims falling into the trap of abandoning the Word of God and what God has revealed to his messengers and taking instead the words of the rabbis and the priests, the fake scholars, the Imams and Sheikhs of Islam instead. Yeah. And so they do exactly what the Quran says not to do.
Yeah, it's so true. And that is why we need you, because you're the one who's pointing out the truth and who's pointing out the truth in all of these scriptures and cutting down the lies and, throwing away all of the lies that are thrown out by all of these non-working scholars who have warped and created this false idea of religion.
And that's why we need you and strong sisters that are like you, that will walk in your path and not be afraid to have enough determination to find the truth in your day and age in which you're alive and to throw back or go opposite, or go on a new path that's different than the way that you were raised and carry that light just like Mary Magdalene did and so many others in the past to the people. So God bless you, and until the next episode, inshallah.
Thank you so much. I can't wait.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.